3. The Sith were about glorification of self and the subjugation of others. That much made sense, as the young Sela saw life in Ludo Kresh's palace. What did not make sense was why so many of her people, in her own family, embraced the Sith teachings when they had no hope of advancement. Why would a Sith live as a slave? It wasn't that way for everyone. In the grand scheme, the Sith Empire had been at rest for many years. But an empire of Sith is an empire of small schemes. Forum Kresh's command, newly adult Sela had watched her master rage at the ventures of Naga Sadow. She had seen Sadow at several meetings in Kresh's company, almost all of them ending in fury. The two leaders differed on everything. Long before the discovery of a space lane into the heart of the Republic set them at odds over the future direction of the Sith Empire. Sadow was a visionary. He knew permanent isolation was a practical impossibility in an empire comprising so many systems and so many potential hyperspace RUTs. The Stygian caldera was a veil, not a wall, and he could see opportunity THRURE. And in Sadow's entourage, Sela had seen many humans and members of other species with apparent status. She even met Corson's captain father once. For Sadow, contact with the new was a thing to be desired, and outsiders could be as Sith as any born in the Empire. For Kresh, who spent his days in battle and his nights toiling on a magical device to protect his young son from all harm, there could not be a worse fate than escape from the Sith's cosmic cradle. "Do you know why I do this?" Kresh had asked it one night. His drunken rage had touched the entire household, Sela included. "I have seen the holocrons. I know what waits beyond. My son looks like me, and so does the future of the Sith. But only as long as we are here. Out there," he'd spat between bloody punches, "out there the future looks like you." Adari Vol had once told Corson that the Kashiri did not have a number large enough to describe their own population. The Omen crew had tried to make estimates in their initial years on Kesh, only to find ever more villages over the horizon. Tetzabal, at 18,000 Kashiri residents, had been one of the last cities counted before the Sith finally gave up. Now they had given up again. The walls of Tetzabal were filled with corpses, making a body count impossible. As they arrived on Uvak Bak that night, Sela, Corson, and their companions could see the dead Kashiri from the sky, littering the dirt roads like branches after a storm. Some had collapsed within the doorways of their hedge arbo shoot huts. It was the same inside, they soon saw. What they didn't see were survivors. If any existed, they were hiding well. 18,000 bodies was a good guess. Whatever happened, had happened suddenly. A nursing woman had fallen, locked together with her infant in a fatal embrace. Tea-roughs laced through the streets, fed from the aqueduct. Several Kashiri had fallen in and drowned right beside their floating woven pails. Alive and alone here stood Ravelin, rattled and clinging inside the still-locked city gate. He had held his position in Tetzabal throughout the evening, looking much the worse for it. Corson approached him as soon as he dismounted. "It started after I met with my contacts here," Ravelin said. "People started collapsing in restaurants, in the markets. Then the panic began." "And where were you during all this?" Ravelin pointed to the town circle, a plaza with a large sundial, much like the one in Tav. It was the tallest structure in the city, apart from the UVAT-driven pulley system that fed the aqueduct. I couldn't find the aid I'd brought with me. I leapt up there to call for her, and to survey what was going on. "Surveying," Sela snarled. "Really?" Ravelin exhaled angrily. "Yes, I was trying to get clear. Who knows what plague these people might be carrying. I was up there for hours, watching people drop. I called for my UVAC, but it was dead too." "Tether hours outside the walls," Corson ordered. He looked flustered in the torchlight. He pulled a cloth from his tunic and placed it over his mouth, not seeming to realize he was the last in the party to do so. He looked at Sela. "Biological agent?" I can't say," she said. Her work had been with the Sith, never the Kashiri. Who knew what they might be susceptible to? Corson tugged at Gloyd. My daughter's in Tav. Make sure she gets back to the mountain, he said. Go. The Hauk, uncharacteristically shaken, bolted for his mount. It could be airborne, Sela said, walking dazed through the corpses. That would explain how it had hit so many, so quickly. But we haven't been affected. A cry came from up ahead. There, Sela saw what their scout had found beneath another body. Ravelin's missing assistant. The woman was in her 40s, like Sela. Human, and dead. Sela clutched the gauze over her face. Fool, fool, I'm a fool. Is it already too late? It's late enough, Ravelin said, catching her unguarded thought. He confronted Corson. You know what you have to do. Corson spoke in a monotone. We'll burn the city. Of course we'll burn it. It's not enough, Captain. We have to shut them out. Shut who out? Sela snapped. The Kashiri. Ravelin gestured to the bodies around them. There is something killing them, and it can kill us. We've got to remove them from our lives once and for all. Corson looked completely taken aback. Sela grabbed his shoulder. Don't listen to this. How will we live without them? Like Sif, Ravelin exclaimed. This is not our way, Sela. We have become too dependent upon these creatures. They are not Sith. Neither are we by your people's lights. Don't get political, Ravelin said. Look around, Sela. Whatever this is should have killed us by now, if it hasn't. We should take it for what it is. This is a warning from the dark side. Behind the cloth, Sela's jaw dropped. Corson snapped back to reality. Wait, he said, taking Ravelin's arm. Let's talk about this. Corson and Ravelin began walking toward the gate, which even now was being opened by their attendants. The village itself seemed to exhale, wretched air passing through the opening. Sela didn't move, spellbound by the bodies around her. The dead Kashiri looked all the same to her. Purple faces and blue tongues, faces twisted in choking agony. Her footing faltered, and she saw Ravelin's assistant. What was her name? Yelana? Ileana? Sela had known the woman's whole family tree the day before. Why couldn't she remember her name now, when the woman was on the ground? Choked on her tongue, bloated and blue, Sela stopped. She knelt beside the corpse, careful not to touch it. She drew her shikar, the glass blade the Kashiri had fashioned for her, and carefully worked open the woman's mouth. There it was, the tongue a mad azure, blood vessels engorged and bursting. She'd seen it before in humans, at the edge of her memory. I need to go back, Sela said, erupting from the village gates. I need to go back home. To the ward. Corson, directing his henchmen building a bonfire, looked puzzled. Sela, forget about any survivors. We are the survivors, we hope. Ravelin, lucklessly trying to calm the collected Uvak Corson had tethered outside the village wall, looked back in alarm. If you think of bringing this disease into our sanctum. No, she said. I'm going alone. If we here are infected, nothing matters anyway. She took the bridle from Ravelin and flashed him an unenthusiastic smile. But if we're not infected, it's like you said, it's a warning. Corson watched her leave and turned to the task of burning the village. Sela didn't look back, soaring into the night. There wasn't much time. She'd need to meet with her entire staff at the ward, her most loyal aides, and she'd need to see her son. When dawn broke over the Takara Mountains, Sela was not found in the shower by Tilden Ka. As much as she now felt like she needed one, Sela hadn't slept at all. With Corson and Ravelin's return in the dead of night, the retreat had become a crisis center. Communications were the real problem. The deaths of nameless Kashiri had stirred the force little for those who didn't care about them anyway. But the aftermath had stirred such confusion in the minds of the Sith that even the most experienced heralds were having trouble fielding messages. Corson had been careful in calling for the return of his people from the Kashiri towns and villages. So far, Tiav and the rest of the major cities had not heard of the disaster in Tetzebal, and he didn't want a mass withdrawal putting the natives on their guard. Sith abroad were instructed to casually remove themselves from public contact and make their way home. What had befallen Tetzebal had not yet struck the major cities, but reconnaissance flyers were still out, checking on the surrounding areas. By the time word came in from the hinterlands, all of the Sith would be safely in their redoubt. Sela saw Corson several times in the morning as she passed through. He wanted her staff to set up quarantines for re-entry to the compound. None of the Sith who had torched Tetzebal were showing any symptoms of distress, but the stakes were high. Sela had assignments of her own in the ward, and in fact few of her medical staffers appeared in public. "We're working on the problem," she had told him. Re-entering at noon, Sela saw Ravelin standing with Corson, monitoring reports. Corson seemed haggard from lack of sleep. His little purple fluff wouldn't be dropping by for her walk today. But Ravelin, despite his harrowing experiences of the day before, seemed rejuvenated. His bald head was a robust magenta. "It goes better than we feared, Corson," Ravelin said. "No Grand Ellerdy now," Sela noticed. "Not even Captain." Corson grunted. "All your people are back? I am informed they have all just arrived back at the stables." "Not much of a vacation," Ravelin said, his facial tendrils curling slightly. "But then, there is much work to be done. On our new priorities." Sela looked up. "It should be about now. Rider coming." The herald sensed the Uvox approach long before it appeared on the southern horizon. Waved directly onto the colonnade, the rider set the beast down and leapt to the stone surface. All eyes were on the new arrival. All save Sela's. "Grand Lord," he said, short of breath. "It has happened again, in Rabelow." Sela heard Corson's gasp, but she saw Ravelin's yellow eyes bulge. It took but a second for the quartermaster to find his composure. "Rabelow? That's on the Ragnos Lakes, isn't it?" Sela looked toward Ravelin and smiled primly. "That's where your people were assigned to go yesterday. Wasn't it, Ravelin?" "Villages on the Ragnos Lakes." He nodded. They'd all been there when it was being discussed. Ravelin cleared his throat, suddenly dry. I should speak then with my associate who just returned from there." He hobbled past Sela, turned and bowed. I really should meet them." "Captain, you do that," Sela said. Corson said nothing, still flabbergasted by the recent news and the coincidence. He watched Ravelin disappear from sight, heading for the stables. "Rider coming!" Corson looked up. Sela thought he almost looked afraid of the news the rider would bring. The news was of another city of death, on another of the Ragnos Lakes. A third rider told of a third, and a fourth. 100,000 Kashiri. What was it? Algae that Ravelin was going to study? Sela crossed her arms and looked directly at Corson, stooped over and nearly her same height. She was tempted to let the moment linger, but there was work to be done. She called for Tilden Ka. Her worried assistant appeared from the direction of the ward, holding a small container. She took it and dismissed him. "Do you know what this is, Corson?" Corson turned the empty vial over in his hand. "Cyanogen silicate?" It was from her medical stores on Omen, and also from the stores Ravelin kept for the creatures in his care. In its solid form, she explained, it was used as a cauterizing agent by healers working with the Masasi. She had seen it used again and again in Ludo Kresh's service. Nothing weaker could do anything to those savages' hides. "It's bad enough on its own," she said. "But if moisture gets into it, it breaks down and intensifies 1,000-fold. Only particle per billion could do anything." Corson's bushy eyebrows flared. What could it do in a water table? Or an aqueduct? Sela held his hands firmly and looked directly into his eyes. "Tetzebal." She explained the story behind the death of her ward's bearer. Beefy Gorham had been seconded to Ravelin's team to help reach what remained in crushed sections of Omen. He'd apparently touched a stained deck plate from the Masasi apothecary and died outside, not long after washing his hands. Death was not instantaneous, but the victim never got far. Ravelin must have seen Gorham's death, she said, and realized he had a tool against the Kashiri. A weapon that could force Corson and the rest of the humans to forget about building on this world and recommit to leaving it. And now, every city that members of the 57 had visited in the previous day had gone the same way as Tetzebal. Corson spun and shattered his bridge chair against a marble column. He didn't use the force. He didn't need to. Why would they do this? He grabbed Sela. Why would they do this, when it's so obvious I'd trace it back to them? How stupid, how desperate would they have to be? Yes, Sela said, curling around him. How desperate would they have to be? Corson looked into the sun, now beating down on the mountain. Releasing her, he looked into the faces of his other advisors, all waiting and wondering. "Bring all the others in," he said. "Tell them